The Grand Canyon, vast, untouchable, one of the most awe-inspiring places on Earth. But what if I told you that somewhere among these ancient cliffs, a lost city might be hidden? Not just any city, but an underground complex that, according to reports, once held Egyptian mummies. Yes, in the middle of Arizona. And no, this isn't from a sci-fi novel or a forgotten episode of The X-Files. This story was published in a respected newspaper with supposed ties to the Smithsonian Institution, that same institution many accuse of covering up inconvenient discoveries. But hold on, if it's just a legend, why is the site still off limits today? Why are there restricted zones in the Grand Canyon where not even civilian helicopters can fly over? And why do independent researchers who tried to investigate Kincaid's cave report being followed, watched, or worse? Today we're going deep, literally, into this story. We'll dig into the records, question the experts, explore theories from absurd to plausible, and most importantly, try to understand why this legend refuses to die. You may have heard of Kincaid's cave, or maybe not, but I promise, once you hear this story, you'll never look at the Grand Canyon the same way again. Because if it's even partly true, someone is hiding something, and maybe it's not just a cave. Maybe it's an entire chapter of our history. But of course, it could all just be a misunderstanding, a coincidence, a journalistic prank, or maybe not. So, who was G.E. Kincaid, and what did he really find in that canyon in 1909? Let's start from the beginning. It was 1909. The Wild West was still a bit wild. Science was trying to make sense of a continent full of secrets, and that's when a name emerged that would haunt historians, conspiracy theorists, and adventurers alike: G.E. Kincaid. According to an article published in the Arizona Gazette on April 5, 1909, Kincaid was a veteran explorer, allegedly hired by the Smithsonian Institution to map parts of the Grand Canyon. The story claims he was rowing down the Colorado River when, in a remote section, he saw something that shouldn't have been there. Stairs, carved into the canyon wall. Yes, stairs, in solid rock, where no known North American culture had ever built anything so elaborate. He reportedly climbed the wall using those steps and found a hidden entrance. Inside, things got strange. According to the article, the cave was massive, with symmetrical hallways, precise ventilation, maze-like passages, and rooms full of artifacts, sculptures, metal tools, weapons, mummies, and the most intriguing part, inscriptions on the walls that resembled Egyptian hieroglyphs. Just imagine, a subterranean city carved straight into the canyon, like something out of Tomb Raider, not an archaeological report. The newspaper described it all in vivid detail: mummies wrapped in dark fabric, statues of figures wearing turbans, a funeral chamber with a central idol resembling Buddha, hardened copper artifacts and gemstones, even a worship room with a throne at its center. All this from one man rowing a boat down the Colorado. Either he was a genius explorer or had a wild imagination that would make H.P. Lovecraft jealous. The Gazette said Kincaid notified the Smithsonian, which immediately sent a Professor S.A. Jordan to lead the excavation. And then, silence. Nothing else in major newspapers. No official expeditions recorded. And the strangest part, not a single document, letter, or photograph about G.E. Kincaid has ever surfaced in Smithsonian archives. Strange, isn't it? A discovery like that. And the most important research institution in America has no record? The Gazette did publish a second article weeks later, but the tone shifted. The story became more mythological, less archaeological. It described tunnels stretching for miles, traces of an unknown, possibly prehistoric civilization. But again, no pictures, no maps, no technical drawings. So what are we dealing with here? A highly detailed report in a real newspaper describing an Egyptian-like city in Arizona, an alleged Smithsonian team that was never officially recorded, and an explorer who, like so many American legends, simply vanished from history. Now, if it was fake, why name the Smithsonian? And if it wasn't, why has no one been able to revisit that cave? But maybe the most unsettling part of the story isn't the city, it's what it contained. artifacts with a technological level supposedly unknown in pre-Columbian America. In nature, copper is soft. You can bend it with your hand. To be used as a weapon, it must be alloyed with other metals, like tin, to make bronze. Native American cultures knew copper. They used it for ornaments, small tools, but never on a large scale, and there's no evidence they ever mastered advanced metal forging. Yet Kincaid claimed the cave held hardened copper tools, made with techniques that wouldn't appear in Europe for thousands of years. And then there were the inscriptions. Kincaid said the walls were covered in symbols resembling Egyptian or Tibetan scripts. According to him, Professor Jordan tried to analyze them, but couldn't translate them. The thing is, no native culture in the American Southwest used a writing system anything like Egyptian hieroglyphs. Not even the Maya, and their script didn't reach this far north. So where did those symbols come from? And this isn't the first time archaeology has found tech in the wrong place or time. Remember Puma Punku in Bolivia? Stone blocks with surgical precision, fitting together like Lego, or the Antikythera mechanism, a mechanical computer from ancient Greece. Those are real documented finds that challenge the traditional narrative. And now, we add a hidden city in Arizona with ventilation, symmetry, advanced architecture, and hardened metals. If true, it shatters everything we know about pre-Columbian civilizations. If false, it's an extremely sophisticated hoax. But what about the Smithsonian? How did a story with their name on it get published and vanish without a trace? The Smithsonian is the highest scientific and museum authority in the US. It decides what is fact and what is folklore. So when the Arizona Gazette said the Smithsonian was involved, the impact was immediate. But then came the surprise. No confirmation, no documentation, no record of a Professor S.A. Jordan, and Kincaid, also scrubbed from history. Still, the article claimed a team was sent. Why lie with that level of detail? Some researchers dug deeper. They found a David Starr Jordan, a prominent name tied to the Smithsonian at that time. Same last name? Coincidence? Maybe, but it's suspicious. And this isn't the first time the Smithsonian has faced similar accusations. Since the late 19th century, there have been claims of giant mummies, ceremonial urns, strange artifacts being found, then swiftly taken by government agents, never to be seen again. Some theorists even speak of a secret warehouse, Indiana Jones style. Sounds dramatic, but the pattern of silence is very real. There's also an ideological battle behind all this. Archaeological isolationism, the idea that American cultures developed with no outside influence, no Egyptians, no Phoenicians, no Vikings, no Atlanteans. Any evidence suggesting otherwise, dismissed as fraud, error, or misinterpretation. If Kincaid City existed, it would blow that theory to pieces. Maybe that's why it was never officially acknowledged. Or worse, maybe it was intentionally buried. But if the city did exist, where did it come from? The most popular theory, ancient Egyptians. It suggests that thousands of years ago, Egyptian sailors crossed the Atlantic, traveled up the Mississippi, into the interior, and eventually settled in the Southwest. Sounds absurd, until you remember they've already crossed the Atlantic in papyrus boats. Thor Heyerdahl did it in 1970 with the Ra 2. If he could do it, who else could have? Another theory says it was an even older civilization, pre-flood, maybe survivors from Atlantis or Lemuria, that the Grand Canyon was a final refuge of an advanced culture before it vanished. And there's the most controversial theory of all, ancient astronauts, non-human beings who helped early civilizations and left clues in places like Egypt, Peru, and maybe Arizona. Indigenous legends in the area speak of beings who came from the sky, entities called the Ant People, who lived underground and helped humans survive great disasters. Sounds like myth, but the Hopi people tell these stories with seriousness. To them, they're not fables, they're memories. Another possibility, the city was always there, built by a civilization that lived underground, a recurring theme in indigenous, Hindu, and Tibetan myths. This subterranean civilization appears in cultures around the globe. And there are other reports across the US of buried pyramids, giant skeletons, mysterious carvings, and near the canyon itself, landmarks with Egyptian names, Temple of Isis, Tower of Ra Altar of Osiris. Coincidence? You might be wondering, if the cave is real, why hasn't anyone just gone there? Well, the answer is more complicated and uncomfortable than it seems. The supposed location is Marble Canyon, a place with sheer cliffs up to 3,000 feet high, no trails, and a violent river at the bottom. Even if someone had the skills and gear, they'd still need luck to find the right spot. But that's not the real issue. The area is restricted. The US government has limited access to that part of the canyon. The official reason? Environmental protection, bat preservation. Yet multiple explorers who tried to approach reported strange encounters. Unmarked helicopters, drones, people being followed, gear confiscated. Another odd detail, satellite images of the area are often low res or mysteriously blurred. So we have an inaccessible zone where supposedly there's nothing, yet it's under constant watch. If this is all just a myth, why go to such lengths to keep people away? But what if it is all fake? There's a plausible theory that the 1909 article was a clever hoax, possibly written by Joe Mulhattan. Joe was one of the greatest pranksters of the 19th century. He wrote wild stories, and newspapers printed them as fact. An Aztec temple in Detroit, a meteor filled with human statues, a machine that revived the dead. The Arizona Gazette article has his style, detailed descriptions, made-up names, vague mysteries, and of course, zero evidence. We don't know if Joe wrote it, but he definitely inspired it. So maybe it was a journalistic marketing stunt, a 20th century fake news story, a Ezerkillen Zazkillens clickbait phallic. But even if it was a hoax, why does this story refuse to die? Why are so many people still trying to prove it's real? Why do similar stories keep surfacing across the country? Maybe the article was a cover for something real. Maybe it holds a collective memory. Or maybe a myth older than we think. There's one voice missing from this conversation: the indigenous people. The Hopi, for example, have ancient stories about the ant people, beings who lived underground and saved humanity during great catastrophes. They speak of cycles, of previous worlds, of eras that ended and began again with the help of underground entities. To them, the Grand Canyon isn't just a landscape, it's a portal, a connection to what came before. One of their best-known myths speaks of a messenger who descended into the world of the ancients and hasn't returned yet. When he does, a new cycle will begin. These stories are still told, sung, and danced. They're alive. Even if the outside world keeps ignoring them, maybe Kincaid's cave was never literal. Maybe it never existed. But what it represents, the unknown, the forgotten, the silenced, that is very real. On the surface, this may seem like just another American legend. But when you connect the dots, a story that disappears, an institution that denies, a restricted zone, and an indigenous legend about something buried for millennia. The final question isn't whether the cave existed, it's this: why go to such lengths to hide a story that, officially, is just a hoax? Maybe the greatest city ever built on this continent is hidden beneath our feet. The problem is, we might never be allowed to see it.